You know, 2025, what a year. It really felt like the year that put the entire crypto market to the test. We saw some of the biggest names stumble, while others, kind of surprisingly, found their footing. It was like a line was drawn in the sand between pure hype and real resilience. So today, we're going to break down the year that separated the pretenders from the pillars and what it all really means for the future.
So, I'm sure the big question on your mind is, was 2025 a boom or was it a bust for crypto? Well, as you're about to see, the answer isn't that simple. It's not a clear yes or no. The reality was way more complex and, frankly, a lot more interesting than that.
Really, the theme for the whole year was contrast. On one hand, you had incredible resilience from some, and on the other, a serious struggle for others. So let's dive into the specifics and see what that actually looked like. Okay, let's start with the two titans of the crypto world, right? Bitcoin and Ethereum. These heavyweights pretty much set the tone for the entire market, so let's take a look at how they managed to weather the storm of 2025. So Bitcoin kicks off 2025 on this massive wave of optimism. The average price in January was a staggering $100,000. This set a really high bar that a lot of people thought was just the start of another huge bull run. I mean, the market sentiment was absolutely electric. But by December, the whole story had shifted. Bitcoin ended the year at about $88,300. Now, that might just seem like a small drop, but that final number hides a year of just wild swings. We're talking several sharp corrections and recoveries that kept investors on the absolute edge of their seats. And this right here really captures that tug of war that defined Bitcoin's year. On the plus side, you had institutional adoption, things like the proposal for a U.S. strategic crypto reserve and huge inflows into ETFs. But pulling in the other direction, you had these sharp market corrections and, get this, growing fears about the long-term threat of quantum computing, which could, in theory, break the very encryption that keeps Bitcoin secure. Now let's switch over to Ethereum. It also started 2025 with a ton of momentum, averaging around $3,300. At this point, its dominance as the #1 smart contract platform was just undeniable. It was powering pretty much the vast majority of all the DeFi and NFT projects out there. And kind of mirroring what happened with Bitcoin, Ethereum also saw a bit of a decline by the end of the year. It closed out at about $2,975. This just goes to show you, even with its own unique ecosystem, it was still caught up in the same big picture economic pressures and market-wide mood swings. But what's so important to get here is that Ethereum's fundamentals, the stuff under the hood, stayed incredibly strong. It kept its top spot in the DeFi space, it was attracting serious institutional money, and it was the backbone for major projects turning real-world assets into tokens. And yet, despite all that, it just couldn't escape the broader market volatility, which really says a lot about how connected the whole crypto ecosystem is. So the takeaway here is pretty clear. Both pillars of the crypto market ended 2025 on a downward trend, even with all their individual strengths. Bitcoin's ride was definitely a lot bumpier, but the destination was the same for both. But does that mean the whole market was down? Well, not exactly. And here's where the story takes a little bit of a twist. See, not every major crypto followed that same downward script. There was one big exception that somehow managed to go against the grain completely. Which, of course, leads to the question, if the two biggest players were down, does that mean the entire market was in the red? The answer is no, and the reason is one specific coin in the top 10 that just decided to carve out its own path. And that coin was Binance Coin, BNB. As you can see right here, while pretty much everyone else was struggling, BNB actually finished the year with some impressive growth. It climbed from an average of around $760 all the way up to over $850. So how in the world did BNB manage to swim against the current like that? Well, it looks like it was a mix of things. The BNB chain itself saw a ton of activity and hit its yearly highs during those key market moments. Plus, it was boosted by some high-profile strategic partnerships that gave it more uses, and, really important, successful security audits that made investors feel confident in its ecosystem. Now, while BNB was doing its own thing and thriving, the story for most of the other top cryptocurrencies, what we call the altcoins, was, well, it was very different. For them, 2025 was basically the year of the great shakeout. This table really paints the picture, doesn't it? Just look at that trend column. It is a sea of red.
Take Solana, for example. It started the year super strong, but ended up way down. And it's a similar story for Cardano, XRP, and Avalanch. For the vast majority of the big altcoins, 2025 was just a brutal year.
So why do they all struggle so much? The reasons were different, but also kind of connected. For some, like XRP, that initial hype from things like ETF news just fizzled out. Speculative coins like Dodcoin, well, they took a massive hit because they didn't have strong fundamentals to back them up. And even the altcoins with really powerful tech, I'm talking Solana, Cardano, and Avalanche, even they couldn't escape that powerful market-wide downturn. Okay, so after looking at all that chaos and contrast, what are the big lessons we can actually walk away with from 2025? Let's try to boil it all down to the most important points. The whole story of crypto in 2025 can really be broken down into three key parts. First, the heavyweights, Bitcoin and Ethereum, they weathered the storm and kept their top spots. Second, you had BNB standing apart from the crowd, proving that it was possible to be resilient even in a really tough market. And third, the altcoin market got a harsh reality check. A lot of projects struggled to hold their value, which was a huge reminder of the risks involved here. And all of this leaves us with one final, really crucial question. After a year that shook out so many different projects and really tested the strength of the market leaders, what does the true future of crypto actually look like? That's the thought I want to leave you with. Just a quick heads up before we wrap. All the price data we talked about today is based on estimated monthly averages, and it's just for informational purposes. So please remember, this is not financial advice. Thanks for tuning in.